Hi, friend. Welcome to day 2 of Exodus chapter 15. We saw yesterday that the people of Israel and Moses, they are singing a song to the Lord. They are exalting him. They are praising him. They are full of great joy because of what the Lord has done to their enemies and how he has rescued them from their enemy. And one thing that maybe I alluded to yesterday but didn't go into detail is that reading a song is very different from reading Old Testament narrative, right? Reading the story itself. Do you remember our 3 rules for studying Old Testament narrative? I think early on in our study of Exodus, I said, number 1, God will always be the hero. Well, that rule still holds true for the song. Number 2, read the story literally. All right, there's the rule that does not hold true for a song. A song, it's no different than today. A song's going to be a bit more symbolic, a bit more figurative in speech. And then the 3rd rule for reading Old Testament narrative is look for the spiritual lesson, which I think we can still do that with a song and with what is being sung. So just wanted to mention that as we observe and try to understand what it is the people of Israel are singing, let's keep in mind, this just isn't quite as literal as reading the story itself. Now, we can continue to approach this in the same way we always do with inductive study. We can ask questions, we can jot down some keywords and look up the definitions. I've done all of that in my study today, and I've looked up a ton of cross-references. Cross-references are beautiful and help us understand the passage that we're currently reading and studying today. So right off the bat, you know me, I often ask that who question. Who is this passage referring to? Well, it's referring to, as we see in verse 4, Pharaoh's chariots and his host, this is the Lord, cast into the sea. And his chosen officers were sunk in the Red Sea. We kind of have the where and the when too, don't we? But the who, this is the Egyptian army and the Lord. The battle is between them. And I love this. This takes us back to the last chapter, Exodus 14:14. Maybe it's 13 and 14, where Moses told the people, look, do not fear, stand firm, for the Lord will fight for you today. And he reminds them, look, you have only to be quiet. This battle was not theirs to fight. They had only to be quiet, to trust, to believe in the Lord and stand firm in that belief. I love that. And I think that is so applicable for me, for us today. So what are they singing about today? They are singing about how this was the Lord's battle. And exactly what did the Lord do? Well, he sunk these warriors, the Egyptian army, into the Red Sea. There were some figures of speech, like like a rock, like lead, they sunk to the bottom of the sea. And we all know what it is to throw a rock in water and it just sinks to the bottom. That's what's going to happen to a chariot as well, right? They are sunk. But this song, this is, as we talked about yesterday, it is sung about the Lord. And so that was my question for today. That's my big question, is what is sung about the Lord? What is it? How is it that these people and Moses describe the Lord? What do they ascribe? What kind of character do they ascribe to him? And I see, starting off the bat, we've already said from verse 4 that it is the Lord that casts the chariots, that casts this Egyptian army, that casts all the officers into the sea. And then in verse 6, we see that it is the Lord's right hand. And we might remember earlier in Exodus, we see that God's hand represents his power. That is a place of power, his strength. So God's right hand is glorious in power, they sing. They also say that his right hand shatters the enemy. And that was one of I had a number of keywords, but that was one of the keywords that I looked up. To shatter is to destroy completely, as a brittle object is shattered completely. So love that. It is God's right hand that shatters who? That completely destroys who? The enemy. And in this case, the enemy was that Egyptian army who was in hot pursuit. Verse 9, they sing, the enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. They're coming to take back what the people of Israel had taken from them. My desire shall have its fill of them. I will draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. Okay, so whether or not, I think I kind of debated early on whether or not the Egyptians would capture and take the people back to Egypt. Maybe some of them they would, or would they just kill them so that the people of Israel cannot join forces with Egypt's other enemies and battle against the Egyptians. Friends, it really doesn't matter which they would do. That's a non-issue because God deals with the Egyptians. They sink like lead. They sink like a rock. God, it says, verse 10, you blew with your wind, the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. What else do they sing? The greatness of majesty overthrows their adversaries. Greatness of majesty. I love that. Other synonyms or the way that my Bible dictionary defined this was talking about God's eminence, his outstanding importance, his stateliness, his impressiveness in scale or proportion. So they are singing, really, they're just singing how great is our God, how great he is, how majestic he is, how powerful he is. And some of our worship songs today do the same thing, do they not? Sing praise to God's greatness, his glory, his majesty, his power, his strength. I love that. I love that. The main point, here's what I put as the main point today. I utilized verse 6 to say, the Lord completely destroyed the enemy. Your right hand, O Lord, shatters the enemy. Yahweh, when he speaks, it is so. He said early on in Exodus that he would do this, and he did. And here's the main point of this part of the song. Friends, what's your application for today? I'll tell you where I went. I went to fear. I love that I'm reminded that it is God who fights the adversary. It is God who fights the enemy. So many times I hear people refer to Satan, and yes, he is on the prowl, right? He is on the prowl, but we need not fear him. We need not fear his antics. He is powerless compared to God. And I just said, fear not my enemy. Rather, don't be looking at that. That's what happened with the people of Israel. They looked at the Egyptians in hot pursuit coming after them. That's not where our eyes should be. No, our eyes should be on the Lord. And we need not fear because the Lord fights against the enemy. We have only to be quiet. Going back to Exodus 14:14, we only have to rest and be still and be quiet trusting, believing, having faith in the Lord God, who is almighty to save. Friends, here's the spiritual lesson for today. And hasn't Jesus already done that work on the cross? He has shattered the power of sin and death. We have nothing to be afraid of today.